Hello and welcome to another Paula Armstrong Ceramics. So for this video I was asked how I would make some magnolia flowers. Now this isn't something I've ever made before, so I thought I would run through in this video how I would approach making something that I haven't made before. So I was lucky enough that I knew somewhere where there was a magnolia tree that was in flower. So I went and took photos and picked up some of the petals that had fallen off the tree and had a good look at the magnolia flower in 3 dimensions. If I can't do this, then what I tend to do is use photos. So I will go on the web and I will find photos of things, and I will try and get photos that have some of the really detailed elements of whatever it is I want to build. So in the case of the magnolia flower, I was looking at how it attaches to the tree, how I would make it stand, and create a piece from it, as well as very practical things like the shape of the petals, and how the petals fit together, how many petals were on each layer, what the center of the flower was. So my first step was to go and do this research, find out what it is that I'm actually trying to build with a magnolia flower. Because although I knew what they were, and as it happens, the magnolia tree that I went to look at is in a family member's garden, so I've seen them for many years. But without going and doing the detailed check and just working from what's in my head, I knew what I would come up with wouldn't be accurate. So I wanted to go and do the research and find out exactly what a magnolia flower was and how it was made and built up. So that was where I started. From there, I'm now going to put together a magnolia flower. So this is the first time I'm doing this based on that research that I've done. So I haven't tried this first. So you are literally seeing the process of me figuring out how to build a magnolia flower. I hope you like it. So to start with, what I've done is printed off some of the photos that I've taken of the magnolia flowers. So you see this one I can see the inside, whereas the other ones I can't. And so these are going to be around me as I work so that I can constantly refer back to them. And I've got a small amount of clay because I'm going to work about life size for these. So they're probably about that kind of size. You can scale smaller or bigger depending on what you're comfortable with. For me, that kind of hand size is actually where my comfort zone would be with something like this. So that's where I'm going to start. This first time through, I'm going to stick with a scale that I'm most comfortable with. So I'm not going to need very much clay, especially as the petals are quite thin. So I'm going to start with a small piece like this. Now, obviously, petals are quite thin, so I'm going to roll out this clay quite thinly to start with. Oh, if it doesn't stick to my rolling pin. This is very wet clay, actually. It is straight out of the bag, so I'm kind of surprised with how wet it is, but it's a little bit on the sticky side, so it will help it to be rolling it out and handling it to dry it off a little bit before I start to really work it for the petals. So I'm going to, as always, I'm rolling a little bit on one side, flip it over, roll a little bit on the other side. Now I'm rolling on the fabric for this so that it helps, because my tables have the lines between the boards, so I'm putting the fabric on top to try and help not have those lines as prominent when I roll. You'll still see them, but they're not as bad. Let me see the lines there. It helps with the fabric to make them a little more gentle. Now, I'm not going as thin as a petal is, because I am building this with clay. I know I need some strength behind the clay. So I'm going to leave it a little bit thicker, and then I'm going to thin the edges of the petals to give the illusion of the thinness and the delicacy of the petals, but keeping a little bit of thickness down the centre of the petals to add a bit of strength and stability to the piece. So this is probably two millimeters thick, somewhere around there. I'm also using my main clay, which is a lightly grogged buff raku clay. That is a hand building clay that I'm very familiar with. So for a first time building, it's good to work with a clay that I'm familiar with. It's also, I know, a good hand building clay and works really well for building things that are quite delicate. I can push this clay much further than some of the smooth clays that I've worked with in the past. The downside of this, of course, is this clay is a buff clay, and the Magnolia colour is very much a white. It's a very beautiful, bright white. So I'm going to need to be very delicate with my glazing and making sure that I cover it with a nice white and then blend in the pinks. If you use a white clay base, then you could potentially use pink underglaze to put the pink colours in, and you'd have a lot more control with that and be able to get the very delicate elements of the colour. So I can see there's lines in the pink, whereas an underglaze would work much better for the finish. But as this is the first time I'm doing the building, I'm going to work with my main clay that I'm comfortable with. And then once I've figured out how to build it, then I might change to a better clay for the finish and work that side of it out. So it might take 2 or 3 tries before I get this in different mediums and different ways of finishing before I'm happy with the absolute final outcome. Okay, so I'm going to start with the petals. Sometimes I start with the base so that I know what I'm working with and I'm building up from, but in this case I'm going to start with the petals. Now there's actually a set of 3 that are the original petals that were around the initial bloom, the blossom part of the bloom, the beginning part, the bud. And these ones are, I picked them up off the ground and had a look. They're a similar kind of shape to these petals, but they're not so wide at the top. So the main petals are narrow at the bottom and then get wider at the top, whereas these ones are much more just straight up and in. So I'm going to do those 3 petals first. And there's 3 of them around the bloom. That's actually probably a better picture so you can see. 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to use this end because it's slightly thinner. And let's see, they're possibly a little bit shorter as well than the main body of the blooms. So I've got that kind of shape. Now you can put that back on and use it as a template. And just cut round another one so that you end up with 2 the same. I'm not sure I'm that worried about it with this because the petals aren't necessarily exactly the same. So I'm quite happy here to freehand cut another petal. Just a little bit pointed on the top. I think I need to round that one off a little bit. That's better. We don't want the ends, they're not pointy. So I want to make sure I've got those sort of the shape. But the shape is going to change when I do the pinching of the edges anyway, or thinning the edges down. Right, So now we've got the petals in the middle, and this one's probably a good one to look at for this. I think we've lost one petal here, which is how come we can see in the inside of this. But we can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on that one. Let's see with these. I think there might be a bit fewer actually. Maybe it is just the 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I think there's 5 in the centre here. So we've got 3 of the ones that fold out, 3 that fold out there, and 5 upright ones in the centre there. So I need 5 of the main petal sizes and shapes. So these petals are a little bit different. These ones have a wide top that then goes to a narrower bottom. It's got a little bit of a point on the top, but then it narrows down. Like that. So it's that kind of shape. That's possibly a little bit wide actually at the top there. I need 5 of those. Okay, so my clay is a bit sticky at this point, so I am going to leave these to the side to dry off a little bit, and I am going to work on making this middle piece here. I'm going to do a base underneath as a little cup that I'm going to use to stand everything in, and then I'm going to put the petals in, and then put the middle on top to cover all the joins in the middle. But it's an amazing little shape going on in the middle here, so I'm going to see what I can do to get that kind of shape. I've got a bit of an idea. Thinking I might use a pair of scissors for the middle piece. So that's a little bit on the big side. There we go. And then around the base. Actually, I need a bigger one. If you have smaller scissors, they would possibly work better than this size. can see that. And that's not bad for what I'm trying for. So that's going to be my center. Now this is going to sit in here. And I am going to put, well, I'm going to do the same thing around the edge of this. So I'm going to do the scissors again. Slightly bigger. What I will say is if you are intending to keep your scissors sharp, don't do this with them. It will blunt them fairly quickly. Especially if you're using grobbed clay. This is a little bit on the tall side for fitting in here, so I'm going to trim the bottom. And I'll keep that bit of clay. Pop a bit of slip on. There we go. Add a bit more slip all around this base here, because I'm going to stick a few little spiky bits on. If you're doing little spikes, you're rolling them out and you're finding that they're breaking off on you, it's because the clay is a little bit on the dry side. You can either go back and find some wetter clay and start again, or you can damp down the surface that you're working on. You do have to be careful with these little spiky points because they can break off. Certainly they dry faster than any other part, and so if you knock them they will break off. But there you go, that's how I am going to do the center of mine for this one. It possibly I might trim this down a little bit so that it's the bottom is not quite so thick, but I think it's okay, because actually looking at the picture, the base is actually quite big, so I think we're okay. Possibly next time I would do the middle bit actually a bit taller. So where I trimmed it down, I possibly wouldn't. I would leave it that long. But there we go, that's our middle. So I have the petals drying off a little bit for me at the moment. So my next job is to make the little stand that I'm going to use for it to stand on, which is basically the branch. It's going to be bigger than the branch for practical reasons. I need to get the base so that the whole thing is not going to fall over. I will use these base petals to help that, because I will drop them to the table surface. so that they'll act as extra tripod feet for it. So I won't have to make a massive base. But let's see how I go. I think I'm going to start with a cone and work from that kind of shape. A cone with a bit of a cup on the end. Pinch it out. Like that. I think I'm going to go with that. So, nice simple shape for it to stand, and then those will help add balance as well. At this point I'm going to get a board to work on because I don't want to be lifting this once I've built it. If I build it on the board, then all I have to do is pick up the board. So now I want this nice and stable. I'm going to do it fairly central. You might not want it central actually. You might prefer to have it slightly tilted. Actually, I think I will do it slightly tilted, so it kind of has a front and a back then. So I've got my two, and this is going to sit in here above the petals. So that's now going over there, so I can start work on the petals. Okay, so these are quite thick for petals, so I want to give the illusion of thinning. These are much thinner, so I'm just going to pinch down the edge, and you can see already that it looks considerably thinner. If you just pinch, you'll see all the different marks. So if you go along after you've pinched and just gently rub along, you'll find that it evens it up a little bit. Now, the thing you have to remember with pinching anything is that when you pinch it, you're spreading the clay, it's stretching, it's got to go somewhere. And so, as you can see, this drastically altered the shape. By pinching that side, it ends up as a kind of banana shape. So we're going to even that up with the other side anyway, because I'm going to go down and do the same thing on the opposite side, which should even the shape back out. The thing with doing the pinching, especially with things like petals and flowers and leaves, I find it gives a very natural, very organic movement to the clay that is very much in keeping with making something like a flower. So I love it. I think it's a great way of handling clay. The one thing I will say is do it a little bit at a time. Don't try and do lots. Don't go straight for the finish. Pinch a little and then pinch a bit and then even it out, smooth it along, pinch a bit more and keep going like that until you have what you want. Now these petals have a slight curve to them. So I am going to just run my finger down the centre to give that curve to the petal. There we go. And that will be one of the base ones that just curve around off the base. So I'm going to repeat that same process for all three. So the process for these ones is pretty much the same. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go around and pinch the edges, just to make them look that bit more delicate. So they're a bit finer. Smooth them, get rid of the pinch marks. And the other thing I might check is you can see where I'm pinching it, this is starting to give a bit of a wavy edge, whereas the Magnolia petals don't have that at all. So I'm going to tidy that up with a knife. I'm going to do it all the way around before I do that tidying up, because I want them to have a nice smooth edge, or straight edge is probably better. The Magnolia petals are very kind of thick, waxy petals, which actually are quite a nice thing to build, because it gives you a chance for the clay to mimic it quite well. So the difference with the big main petals is this round bit at the top is kind of its own little dish. So there's a very distinct kind of dip in the shape of these. So I'm just going to use my fingers and my palm to very gently run over and give that shape. This is thinning out the clay in the middle, so it's not quite such a strong center for these ones, but it does a really nice job of giving that lovely curved shape to the petal. Now I need to do that with all the other petals. Okay, So I've got all my petals, I've got my center element, and I've got my stand. So now I'm going to look at starting to put this together and assemble. So the first thing I'm going to do is score the inside of the little base cup, because everything's going to be going and sticking into this. So a nice lot of nice gloopy thick slip under here. So I need my 3 petals for around the outside, and I'm going to, some of them curve right underneath and some of them are out a little bit, so I'm gonna just put them in place, and I'm gonna have, I'll alter them according to what I think looks good. Okay. That one's quite a nice curve, so I might just leave that one. Not like that. And this one I'm really going to curl in. There we go. So how you place the petals is what's going to give you a lot of the effect of your flower. So you need to really think about placement at this point. Now I've scored the middle again, and I'm going to put some more slip on top of these petals, because we now have the 5 main petals to go on here. Now I'm not going to place these where I want them, because I'm just going to lay them out for now, because I need to place that middle in, and it looks like I'm going to need a bit of slip between pretty much each petal. And I've got 5 petals, so I want a star kind of, actually that one's quite a thin edge there. So I'll put that one quite close. Middle down, and then score again on the bottom of centerpiece, slip, pop that in place. And I'm quite glad I didn't make the very base of this very delicate, because it means I can push this down. So that's a good learning point for this. Now this is where it's going to get entirely tricky. It's making sure that these are going to stand up where we want them. If you curve the outside edges in a little bit, it will make the petal shape a bit stronger. so that it's not just a straight petal up, but a curved. I guess stem to the petal is probably, I'm not sure. What that part of the petal is called. Okay. Got some space over here, so I can pop that in to help hold it in place. And actually, I can do the same on this bit. And then I just have this last petal. Now I would like to be able to see that centerpiece a little bit. So I think I'm going to leave this one open just a little bit so that it can be seen in. So I need another pot. Let's just drop that back down now. I'm going to get myself another one of the jars. And I can pop that in place like that. Now at this point is where you need to make sure that your petals are indeed where you want them. So I've got two over here that are overlapping a little bit and one that's collapsing a little bit, which is not overly helpful. So I need to do some work on this one. If things collapse a little bit too much, you can get them so that they're pretty much in position, and then dry them a little bit with either a hairdryer or a paint stripper or whatever, just something to speed dry them just a little, and that should help you. Okay, I want to see this, but this is, I do want it sealed a little bit. There we go. Okay, so I think that's going to do me for this. I'm going to leave that now to dry so that it gets stronger. Once it's dried off, it's going to be very, very delicate. But I will then transfer it to the kiln and put it through a bisque firing. There are points that I think I'm going to need to improve slightly with the making. There's a bit of messiness around this bottom that I think might need a bit of tidying. I might be able to do that before it goes into the kiln. Some of the edges of the petals I will tidy if I can. It's obviously, there's very delicate points with the petals. If I put any kind of pressure on here once it's dry, they're going to break off. So I will do as much tidying as I can before it goes into the kiln. But it won't be too much. It will be done, I think, a lot in the filing down after bisque, I think. But there are some little bits here that I can see that I might just go in now with a damp paintbrush. I've just got some water and a nice soft bristle clean brush, and I can just go in and tidy up. I can see a little bit of the messy slip down here. I'm not too worried about the middle being a little bit on the messy side, because that's got the spiky centre in there and it is a little bit on the messy side. But this, oh yeah, that's actually much better. That was a good move, I think. Say, you don't want to put too much water in at this point now, because I'm adding water to the weakest point of the build. In the middle here at the bottom of the petals. So be very very careful with this kind of tidying. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. So now I'm just going to leave it and let it dry.